In this episode of the Realty Classroom, we talk about the 4 keys to real estate agent database management. Hey, I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom, and today I want to talk about an extremely important subject, the 4 keys to real estate agent database management. Yes, also known as follow-up and follow-through. It's a critically important subject to talk about because nobody does it that well, and it is the largest opportunity. Think about this for a second. We are in the creation of relationship management business, yet this is not the first subject we talk about. We talk about vision and selling and marketing. We get all excited and we run away from the stuff that comes dressed in overalls and looks like work, like Thomas Edison said, okay? So let's get down to this for a second. Point number 1, your database is your most valuable asset. Yes, business language, assets. When you are building a business, the whole business itself hopefully becomes an asset. Something that can be sold, or the book of business can be sold, whatever it may be. But if you ever want to do that, or you just want to have a good solid business, see your database as your most valuable asset to begin with, even when it's empty, when there are no contacts. Envision that as the thing that you're trying to bring more value to. So that begs the question, well, how do you get that done, right? So number 2, if you start by setting your database up like an assembly line, you'll really be well off. Now remember, in other segments we've talked about the overall business and marketing, which is hopefully going to bring that traffic in. Contacts, right? You hear contact management systems and you hear all these different words. It's just a place where we can take names, numbers, and addresses and people, yes, relationships with people. We are in the service business, but you still should set it up like an assembly line because all contacts are not the same. Their disposition changes as they go through your system or your business like an assembly line. Think about Henry Ford for a second. He did not invent the automobile. He really refined a way to build it better, faster, and more efficient. So he produced a more consistent product. And that's what people are looking for. The ability to know that you give them the best chance to win. They don't want you to make it up on them. So if it's an assembly line-like process that you're rinsing and repeating, you're making refinements to deliver a consistently high level of service. The assembly line. Set it up that way. It's been done before. Number 3, now that it's set up, segment that database like assembly line, okay? What does that mean? Well, think about it this way. There are modules that can be managed. In my world, I use a great piece of software where I was able to go in and see the database section in modules. So after the marketing module, which happens largely outside of my database, even though some of it's done once they come in, I see the segmentation of the contact starting as a lead. Now, for a lot of you, that can mean many things. What I thought it should be was somebody whose disposition, and remember, these are people we don't know oftentimes. As the lead comes in, we don't know if they will do anything when it comes to buying or selling ever. So a lead, we know nothing about their timing, motivation, etc. So a lead was one segment. Now, as we begin to market and telemarket and build relationship with those folks, along that assembly line, we produce one of 2 things. Something that goes out, just like an assembly line, it's waste product. I hate to talk about that about people, but they just might not want to do business with you. So they need to get out of there. But if they move along the assembly line as part of the finished product, which by the way should be a past client that's happy, not the money, okay? So now they come over and they become a prospect. Now this is just language we use, so you can use it if you want, but just whatever you want to change that disposition from a lead where you know very little about them to the prospect where you know a little bit of something of what they perceive their timing to be. All this nonsense about buyers are liars and sellers aren't telling me the truth. Baloney. They're nervous. They don't know where they're at. It could be a lot of reasons why they sound a little bit wishy-washy when they move from lead to prospect. Now, prospect in our world is simply somebody who will give us a chance to have a discussion with them and build a further relationship. So a lot of people at the lead stage say, nope, leave me alone, no problem. Out they go. They're not going to make it further along the assembly line. But a prospect, now we have something. Now we're talking. Now we're building the early stages of a relationship. And ultimately, if you do a good job in that segment, you create what? A client. Now you have a chance to list the property and get it sold. You have a chance to show the buyer some properties and get them under agreement with something they like. There are your 3 segments for the disposition of a contact before they enter a very next phase for closing, where a lot of us abdicate that responsibility and we forget that that is really the next module inside of this database. So what are we doing inside the database when we go from conversion module to closing module? So think about what I'm saying here about these segments. I have a conversion module where they go from lead to prospect where they'll talk to me to client where they'll work with me, over to closing once they're under agreement, and all of the things that happen there. And you all know there are myriad reasons or ways for a deal to blow up at that point. So the TLC almost has to kick to a higher level in that module. Now again, if you do that correctly, your 3rd segment inside the database would be a really solid, good past client follow-up system. So 3 modules inside the database are critical. Marketing, like I said, blends in before the database, during the database, but the key is we go from conversion to closing to past client. Segment it that way. That way you'll be much less confused about the disposition of all these names you have. Now, the last piece of this is program your database, you know where this is going, to hold you accountable. I hear this all the time from coaching members. Well, would you hold me accountable? Well, sure, but that's going to be what? One little segment or sliver of time each week, each day? What's it going to be? What about all those other hours where there are all these tasks that have to get completed while you're segmenting and resegmenting and doing the tasks that it takes? I call it breaking the bricks. You really think somebody's going to stand over on top of you and make sure that you're breaking the bricks to do all this work? It's not going to happen like that. What is going to happen is if you program your database to be task-driven and you keep it that simple. What tasks do I have to do for a lead versus a prospect versus a client during the closing? All of those things that have to happen, and then the past client to follow up. Those are tasks. It's simple. Break the bricks and have the system programmed to remind you all of the tasks. That way, when you sit down to do database management, it's very clear as to what you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do it. So let's summarize. These are 4 mega keys to database management for any real estate agent or agency. Very critical components. Number 1, remember this is the asset. If I came to you and said, I'd love to buy your business, show me your database and how it's segmented and how it's set up. Does it look like an assembly line? Does it? Start with thinking that it is your best asset at the end game and will help you during the process too. Number 2 is set up your database like an assembly line so that you can see this linear progression of how things go. See, most real estate agents are so confused and discombobulated that there's not a clear place to go and do work every day along that assembly line. That's why there's so much confusion. So really, by segmenting along the assembly line, you know which tasks have to be done, and more importantly, you can prioritize. Now, you might build an assembly line left to right, meaning you take somebody from lead to prospect to client to closing to past client, but oftentimes inside of one of those modules, for example, conversion, you get to the office, the first thing you do is take care of all your client tasks, okay? So that's really important to understand all of that. And then finally, program this thing to keep you accountable. There is no real estate agent out there in this digital age that shouldn't be very clear that they are accountable to the tasks that must get done to produce consistent and predictable businesses. Hey, I am thrilled you're here listening to this, because this is one of the toughest subjects, because like I said, this is really the hard work. There's not a lot of fun in setting this all up or actually doing all of these tasks that have to get done. But I promise you, I've seen it, I've done it myself, I do it myself, and all of our coaching students do it. And when they build in that discipline, it does actually become fun, because you start to see the predictability and sustainability of a really solidly managed database. So, if you're listening to this, or you're watching it, wherever you are, do us a favor. Would you like it? Would you subscribe here? But most importantly, we'd really appreciate it if you would share this with a fellow real estate agent in need. We appreciate you. Thank you.